Alrighty, so today we will be discussing ocean ecosystems. A lot of this material you might already know through your research that you started this week or the week prior. Alright, so some of this is going to be review. And speaking of review, let's do a quick brain dump about what we've already learned. So, we should know the different formations that cover the ocean floor, kind of like the land beneath the sea. So this formation is called the continental shelf, the slope, the rise, abyssal plain, mid-ocean ridges, and trench. The continental shelf is where we go to the beach. It's very shallow. This is where all the warm water is. Like the Gulf of Mexico is all a big part of the continental shelf. The slope is the drop zone, so the dramatic drop from the continental shelf down to the abyssal plain. The rise is where all that great sediment deposits and builds up into layers. So this is where really good sedimentary rock is made, like limestone. Abyssal plain, this is the land or sea formation that covers most of the ocean floor. So a great chunk of this is in the middle of the Ring of Fire, so that Pacific Ocean. Mid-ocean ridges, this is made from a divergent plate boundary, so lava seeps up and then out and cools and hardens into little ridges. And a great example of this is the mid-Atlantic ridges, which is in the dead center of the Americas and Europe and Africa, so right underneath the Atlantic Ocean. And finally, the trench. This is where it gets really dark and deep. In Finding Nemo, you guys saw last week, Dory goes down there, which you know can't happen because Dory is a fish that has bones, right? And if Dory were to go in the trench, this is kind of making it a fictional movie, which obviously fish don't talk, but Dory would not survive in that environment because of that intense pressure. We also talked about characteristics that change as you go deeper in the ocean. So, for instance, some things that increase are salinity, right? It gets saltier as you go deeper. It gets colder, right? Let's see. Anything else that increases? The pressure increases. So some things that decrease are light. It gets darker. Life. So less fish live there. Most of the fish live up here, kind of by the continental shelf, because that's where all the good stuff is. That's where the seaweed is, the photosynthesis, right? So a lot of animals live up here, and so do the predators that eat them. So sharks, dolphins, whales, right? Although some whales dive deep. So we talked about the characteristics and sea formations. So let's talk about some things that are new to us. So life beneath the waves. So almost 90% of Earth's life forms dwell in the ocean, but the deeper we dive, the stranger the creatures get. And what I mean by strange, that's kind of a relative term. So, as you know, the bottom of the ocean has not been explored very much, right? And so it is a strange environment because it is an extreme environment, which means, well, it's kind of extreme as Antarctica is to us, right? We would not want to live in Antarctica because we don't have those adaptations to survive that harsh environment. We need a lot of blubber, like penguins and sea lions, which we don't have that, right? You need a lot of fat to survive in that cold. So the animals in the bottom of the ocean have these bizarre adaptations like bioluminescence, where they can light up, right? They don't have bones or invertebrates. So these are adaptations that help them survive that very harsh environment. And we're going to talk more about that throughout this presentation today. So let's get into it. So throughout your research, you have kind of done some research on sunlight, twilight, and midnight zones. The next one, the bottom one, might look unfamiliar. It's called the abyssal zone. But the abyssal zone is technically a part of the midnight zone. It's not really its own separate thing. So abyssal and midnight, I want you to group together. In this diagram, it looks like all the zones are equal, right? They're equal in depth. And my question for you is, do you think that's true? Do you think the sunlight is equal to twilight zone? Or do you think there is a zone that makes up most of the ocean? And which one do you think is the thinnest zone? All right, so on the following slide, you're going to answer a couple questions about that. You don't have to be right. I just want to know your prior knowledge going into this. What do you think the thinnest zone is? The zone that has the most depth, that covers most of the ocean? Tell me your thoughts on the following slide.